Hello there, how you doing? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Alicia and today we're going to be talking about the most disappointing books that I read in 2021. So grab a snack, grab a coffee, grab onto your horses because today we're going to be breaking some hearts. I have 4 books for you today that didn't quite really meet my expectations of what I wanted out of them, or they just started out really good and by the end ended up being quite lackluster. So by no means do I think these books are bad, they were just average reads. So let's just go ahead and rip off the band-aid and start off with the first book on this list, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. The reason that this book is on this list is because when I was reading it, halfway through I was like, that's it. This is going to be my favorite book of the year. This is going to be it. I was 100% sure halfway through this book that would be the case. But during the second half of the book, I just felt very disconnected to everything. The plot was aimlessly meandering, and by the end, instead of feeling in awe or like I just read the greatest thing ever, I was left in a state of confusion and like, what the heck? So The Starless Sea is a very imaginative exploration of storytelling, and the entire book is also set up as the series of stories that are nested in other fable-like stories that are also intertwined with these other fable-like tales. And I just found the way that all of these interwove very charming, very creative, very imaginative. So right off the bat, I loved the concept of this book. And so in this one, we're actually following our main character, Zach. Zach ends up finding this mysterious book at his library. He becomes very intrigued by this book and about who wrote it, and as he searches for whoever wrote this book, he ends up becoming part of this larger plot. I'm trying to be very vague because I don't want to spoil the book for anybody who hasn't read it yet. So it was just very intriguing. There's this mystery behind all of it, and then all of a sudden weird things start to happen, and it was also very fantastical and very whimsical, and I also really loved the writing style. It was very beautiful, but still very digestible and easy to read. And so then we get into the later half of the book. This is where it started to feel like the plot was meandering and the characters seem to just be talking in metaphors and doing their own thing without having a real purpose. Near the end of the book, the character motivations aren't as clear. The plot also becomes muddled, and it just slowly began to lose the appeal for me. I think that as an exploration of storytelling, I thought it was fantastic, and I love what Erin Morgenstern is trying to do here. She's pushing against the box. She's doing something in her own way and trying to push boundaries, and I love that. But with the emphasis on stories and storytelling, I, as a reader, became confused with the method in which the story is told here, and that negatively impacted my reading experience towards the end. So by the end, everything just sort of felt like gibberish, and that's the number one reason why this book is on my most disappointing books of the year. The second book on this list is a graphic novel, and this is CQ, A Journey Through American Loneliness by Kirsten Ratkee. And this was similarly another book that once I picked it up, I was like, oh yes, this is going to be on my favorites of the year. Possibly not my favorite book of the year, it wasn't to that extent, but I was like, wow, okay, I am loving this. I love the exploration of loneliness and connectedness. I love the way that it's being told in this like graphic novel form. I love the colors and the hues. They feel very melancholy but hopeful, and just like the artwork and everything, it was just really flowing for me, and I really thought this was gonna be one of my favorite books of the year, but unfortunately, this took a weird turn also about halfway through, and by the end it just ended up really disappointing me. So in CQ, the author investigates connection and human desire to connect and to relate, and she also touches on loneliness and explores loneliness as a concept. She does it in a personal way, inserting herself and some of her experiences in the book, but also through an investigative lens. She touches on the rise of Instagram, she touches on the invention of the laugh, and she also includes some animal studies, particularly those of Harry Harlow. And so this is a perfect and appropriate time to talk about trigger warnings for this book. If you are someone who doesn't like animal violence, animal experimentation, or animal abuse, you shouldn't read this book because it is very explicit in the way that it does refer to these studies, and there's illustrations to go along with it. So really there's no escaping it, and it takes up a majority of the chunk of the book, and that's really where it began to lose me. I understand that the author wanted to back up some of the statements that she was saying with studies. I don't think they were quite necessary, in my opinion, for her to send the message that she wanted to send. And so it went from this exploratory graphic novel on loneliness and what it means to feel lonely and what it means to connect with other humans to this weird book on animal experimentation, and I just felt like it was a little bit unnecessary. The more I read it, the more I realized that it didn't really have a hopeful message. She does end on a hopeful note, but the messages through and through and through felt very melancholy. And as someone who picked this book up because I was feeling very lonely and I wanted to explore connection more, I was left feeling more lonely by reading this book, if that makes sense. I was just saddened to a deeper extent, and I guess that's something that I didn't really need at the time as well. So it can have this like melancholy, somber, dark tone embedded in the actual story of the book, and on top of that there's some animal abuse and experimentation. So because of that, it had to end up on this list. The third book on this list is one that pains me. I feel like I'm betraying my culture and my family and my ancestors by putting this particular book on this list, but that is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Sisneros. I actually ended up reading it in Spanish, La Casa en Mango Street, and I just want to reiterate that the books on this list, I don't think they're bad. They're not badly written, they don't have a bad story. It's just they didn't live up to my expectations of what I wanted from a book. The first work that I read by Sandra Sisneros was actually Women Hollering Creek, which is a collection of short stories, and I did read that when I was back in high school, so it was quite a long time ago, and I just remember loving it. Like, I remember just identifying so much with the stories and just really seeing myself in them. I don't want to say that that's not the case here. Certain vignettes in here really felt like I was looking through a time capsule and looking at different parts of my life, or like looking in a mirror. There were certain vignettes that felt that way for sure. But you know, this was written a few years ago. When was this written? This was written back in 1994. I was born in 1994. And so there were some parts of this that just felt very dated, and there was just some things that I couldn't overlook. So The House on Mango Street is a young adult coming of age story and tale, and it is told as a series of vignettes. Another book that is also told in vignettes that I absolutely adore is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I actually have it somewhere up there. I don't know if you can see it, but that one I adore. This one, I still love the way in which this story is being told as a series of vignettes, but like I mentioned, just some parts of it felt very, very dated to me. The narration style of House on Mango Street is also very simple, very straightforward and to the point, and I feel like that's part of the charm of this book as well, is that it's very simple to read, it's very easy to digest. And so that being said, because it is told in a very simple and succinct language, I wanted a little bit more. I really wish that The House on Mango Street could have been longer. It's, I think, a little bit over 100 pages, so it's super short and very quick to read. I just wanted a little bit more depth from it, and I wanted it to be longer, so because of that it ended up on this list, although it was still a 4-star read for me. Fourth and final book on this list is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. So I had just read Home Before Dark, and Home Before Dark is my favorite book by Riley Sager. I just love that book. I remember having so much fun reading it, and I liked the way that things were tied up at the end. I liked the reveals, I liked the atmosphere, I loved everything about that book. It was just so fun and easy to read. And so coming off of that high, I read the blurb for The Last Time I Lied, realized it was told in a sort of camp setting. It's like in dual timeline. I just love that stuff. Like, I eat that stuff up. That's my kind of stuff, especially for thrillers. So I thought that I was gonna love this book, and I just didn't. And so this one, we're following our main character, Emma. When she was young, she attended a camp called Camp Nightingale, I believe. And during that time, she was living with 3 other friends, I believe. Maybe it was 4. I can't really remember. But they all end up going missing, and she's the only one who didn't. And so years later, she's asked to come back onto the camp. It's being reopened. She's asked by the owner of this camp to teach because she is a painter, I believe. Yeah, she is. See, I already forgot the plot for this book, which should tell you something. So yeah, she comes back, and then it seems like everything is happening again. She, for some reason, has to bunk in a cabin with 3 other girls that are attending camp. Like, she doesn't have her own cabin, or they didn't think to put all of the teachers in one cabin. That's already sus, right? But anyways, those girls go missing and it just seems like, you know, something nefarious is going on. I feel like this book had so much potential. There is parts of the book where there's some lore that is involved about that village and about possibly being flooded, like there's like a secret village underneath the lake. Like I find that fascinating. I love books and stories that incorporate lore and folktales and stuff. I just wish that part of the book would have been more integral to the story. But also where this book really lacked for me is that none of the characters really stood out to me. They all felt like I had either read them before, or they also felt like paper cutouts of an actual person. Like they felt like written characters, especially Emma, who is our main character. It was really weird because she makes some strange and unusual, you know, decisions. And like there's this part of the book where she's like having a heart-to-heart with the girls in the cabin, and she's like really opening up to them. And as someone who's supposed to be in her 30s and she's oversharing all of this information to teenagers, that just, one, doesn't seem appropriate, but two, it just seems unbelievable. So there were lots of parts where I had to suspend my disbelief in this thriller. And I just felt like for me to do that, especially with a book that didn't really border on, oh, is it supernatural or is it not? I feel like that there was no need for me to try to suspend my disbelief, but I still had to. The other criticism that I have of this book, and this is totally subjective, I mean, this entire video is subjective, but the pacing was a little off. Like I just feel like there wasn't enough tension that was built to the end result. So by the end I was like, yeah, you know, things are happening, but I'm not really interested anymore, because there wasn't that pull, you know, there wasn't that tension building that kept me engaged, where I was like at the edge of my seat just really wanting to know what happens. There was none of that. So by the end I was like, okay, cool, good story, you know, solid read, move on to the next one. So because of that, it sadly ended up on this list. So those were the most disappointing books that I read this year. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with any of my choices. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I will see you on the next one. Bye!